And let's get into some local news. And not positive local news, unfortunately. And it is a bit of a reflection of the Australian gaming landscape. So Riot Games, so very famous for League of Legends, they were really trying to push into Australia. They had an office in Sydney. They had an Oceania esports league called OPL, and they've made the decision to actually close their Sydney office and lay off the 10 permanent staff there. You know, esports in Australia, it's kind of interesting because, you know, obviously my love for Rocket League, I follow sort of the Oceania Rocket League competition, and it's very like this. It's a fascinating experiment to see how big esports are, because esports is not mainstream. Let's be real. And Australia being such a smaller population and more dispersed across the country, it just sort of never really takes off, a lot of these esports in Australia. And they kind of can never really land it. And even with this game being as massive as it is, they still really haven't made it successful here. I mean, like, I actually don't know. Like,
no, not at all.
Into esports,
but you know, I'm
all?
not
Any
also not
of
into
that,
sports.
or?
I like to play a game, not watch other people play it. So that's the part I never got. I can see it as one of those things where once you get into it, you really get into it. But to me, the fascination just was never there. I don't get the point of sitting there watching someone else play over and over again when you can just go play that game yourself. So, but also I think, you know what it comes down to?
Like,
sorry, I think it's the fact that I'm not into the kind of games that esports games are conducive to. So I'm not into COD. I'm not into repetitive games like that.
That's actually
so
really true.
Naturally, why would I sit there watching or giving a shit about a Rocket League if I'm not into Rocket League? So
yeah, no, that is true. I'll give you that. That generally, the games that, you know, they have esports for, like the MOBAs and things like that, they're just not games you play.
Well, it comes down, like I said, the main reason behind that. And again, I don't think they're bad games or anything. They're amazing in their own right. Hence why they're so popular. I just don't have the time for that repetition anymore. There's just so much good stuff out there to not just in the gaming space, but to do in life in general. And you have such limited time to do that stuff in. But even within the gaming space, there's so many amazing games out there to experience that I don't have the time to do the same thing day in, day out for months at a time, you know, literally repeating exactly the same thing with slight variations. There's too much good stuff out there to explore, to spend time like that.
Yeah, and then more bad news in the Australian gaming landscape. And like, the context is gaming is probably the strongest it's ever been in our lifetimes. Gamespot Australia, Gamespot, the parent company, are closing the Australian outlet for Gamespot. And then that obviously is impacting, you know, the editor-in-chief who's been there for like 12 years. You know, a lot of their long-serving staff have been there 9 years. And yeah, they're closing their presence here, which, you know, the way it's going in the Australian market, I feel that generally the independent outlets are doing, you know, and this is just reality, unfortunately. For me, they're doing a better job than some of these massive outlets like IGN Australia, GameSpot. You know, GameSpot Australia, Kotaku. I feel like they're not really breaking as many stories. They're not across things as you know, other players in that space. Like,
it's interesting, isn't it? Yeah.
Nintendo, Press Start, and Stevivor. Like, I feel like they're way on top of, you know, the pre-orders. What's happening? What are Target doing? What is this doing? Like, for me, I get more information from them than I do these bigger outlets. And
it is a bit unfortunate. But I mean, not to bag a site like Kotaku out, because I used to visit it a lot. Used to even post and stuff. And I haven't for a while, just because I felt it became less about games and more about politics and identity and stuff that, and look, and PC culture and stuff that had a place, and it attracted a certain demographic, and I think it's good that they had a lot of those articles and talked about a lot of that stuff. But I also think it alienated a lot of people, because a lot of people just want to talk about games. They just want to see what the games news is and not get into the politics of it as much. So I feel like maybe they also got impacted a little bit by stuff like that.
Yeah, and I think generally, you know, that long-form journalism just doesn't get clicks. So, investing a bunch of time, doing a lot of research, it just doesn't pay off as much. And it's kind of funny, like, in a way, like even in our podcast, one thing I'm really passionate about and want to start pursuing is, doing more long form content, reaching out to people who have released games in Australia, Australian devs, and having like long interviews, long chats, because you can, and we're not like, it actually makes sense for the format. Whereas having a really long article and interview with one of the Hollow Knights developers, who they're Adelaide-based boys, it's kind of no one's going to click it. Whereas if you're listening to it, you're at the gym, doing whatever you do, cleaning.
It does, but isn't that kind of a sad reflection on society in general, that our ability to focus on something and focus on a single thing, it just doesn't exist anymore? We can... Yeah, but compared to before,
I get what you're saying.
Yeah, totally interrupted. I don't have 10 minutes to read an article. I'd rather listen to the podcast version of it in summary while I'm doing 10 million other things. It kind of sucks in a way. I still read books, as a lot of people do, obviously, and I really enjoy the experience of sitting down, try not to have any distractions, putting my phone away, and that's the focus. That's the only thing that I do for the next, 2 hours or something. And it's a really good experience that I feel even myself, I just don't get that as often anymore. There's just so many distractions, and I like little bite-sized pieces of information everywhere. And I know people have talked about this to death, but it's kind of annoying and sad that happens. And I wonder though, to what effect games have had an impact on that. So when you think about, the formula of a Call of Duty game, where you're in it, you survive for like 40 seconds, then you die. You're in it, you survive for 30 seconds, you die. It's that bite-sized, in-out action, not a long-term, and I wonder what psychological effect that repetition of that particular task has on people's ability to then focus on other things in life for a prolonged period of time.
I think games probably very minimal compared to
absolutely,
the phone.
You're right,
And like when I say the phone, smartphone, I think like, the introduction of smartphones about 10 years ago has had like that, and then combine it with social media. And then one thing in particular with social media that I was always very... Like I was always, I think my view on social media. I was always a bit wary of it, always, just because, there is a very superficial nature to social media that, like, the whole thing is engineered about superficiality. And then the change that they made to it, and it's all about, getting engagement and making money, and I get that. I'm not blaming that. Like, they're going to do them, and that's, what makes sense for their business. But the thing that really worried me, and I remember when they made this change, and I was really like disturbed by it, was when they stopped showing you, and all the social media platforms do this, when they stopped showing you unadulterated posts from people So, hey, I've got 50 friends, or 150 friends is the average on Facebook, and I just see a timeline of all the posts that they're posting. Instead, they have an algorithm which shows posts that I'm more likely to like or engage with. So really hate, anything that gives me a reaction. Like that's literally the model.
That gets retention.
How do I get a reaction out of this person?
It's about keeping you on there to keep scrolling to give you those ads.
And for me, and for me, when I saw that, I was like, wow, this is so scary, because my analogy is always, there's a village idiot in every village, right? And it's like 1 out of 150 people is a village idiot, right? But generally in society, for like 100,000 years we've been around as a species, they're isolated, and the rest of the society puts pressure on them to go, well, you're crazy. You've got these crazy views. You're not like normal. And to me, that's actually a positive thing. It suppresses extremism in that way. And when I say extremism, I mean on the left, on the right, on all those political dimensions. Now, with the way that these social media platforms work, it actually connects through algorithmically these village idiots together to a point where, they actually think, other people agree with it. Oh, they're saying that. It's even more extreme than what I'm saying. I'm like the normal one here.
You go down a rabbit hole after that. And you keep getting content that is the same, and it supports your views, and you just keep getting the same thing, and then you stay in your bubble, because why would you get out of it if that's all you get?
Yeah. and I'd really be careful about getting too political, but even recently, because I'm originally from Melbourne and my parents are in Melbourne and most of my mates are down there. Like there's some issues with the government, whatever you want to decide and your views on it. It's just the thing that annoyed me was my mum was talking about it and she's like, oh, everyone's really against the Premier on this. I'm like, no, Mum,
yeah.
no.
Exactly.
You are seeing all the people that agree with you and you're thinking everyone's against him. It's like, no, not everyone's against him. Like, I'll reserve what I believe about it. And I think you can have a view either way, but it's a very dangerous thing. And that to me just crystallizes.
Of course.
That's exactly what's wrong with this.
Yeah.
Like that, you have this situation.
It's scary.
Yeah. So I think those things, sorry, this is a long bow, but I think the combination of smartphone, I can use that anytime. I'm constantly distracted. I'm constantly picking it up. And then the social media connection there is just obliterating people's attention.
I wouldn't say it was the genesis. I'm sure other things before that, slowly changed the way humans interact and the way they think. But absolutely, the phone was probably the biggest impact. But back to gaming, I think you were going to talk about what's in the bargain bin this week.
Yes.